Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Nyer, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC. I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar, the Virginia SBDC is the largest and most effective provider of customized counseling and education for small businesses in Virginia. Most of our services are offered locally in 28 locations throughout the Commonwealth. Today's webinar is one of our educational offerings and is part of our ongoing webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's topic will be presented by Ray Sidney Smith, a web and mobile strategist and author of Solo Mo Success, Social Media, Local and Web Small Business Marketing Explained, and president of W3 Consulting. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia Small Business Development Center Network for having me here on the Marketing and Managing on the Web series. Today, as Tracy said, we're talking about telephony for the modern small business. A couple of housekeeping items. One, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them now. Tracy is manning the question panel, so ask your questions. She'll interject as necessary, and then we'll answer any other questions at the end. Feel free to ask me questions via email. I'll have my email on the final slide, but also you can feel free to tweet at me at W3 Consulting, hashtag it beyond Google, and I'll know it's regarding the webinar series, and I'll be able to answer your questions there as well. Finally, go ahead and follow at Virginia SBDC. That's where you can find out about upcoming programs and other resources that the Virginia SBDC puts out there for Virginia small businesses. So it's always good to follow them and engage there as well. Okay, a couple things about me that Tracy didn't mention but are just good for you to know if you have questions. I'm one of the Google Small Business Advisors, so I spend time in the Google Small Business Advertiser community answering questions and guiding small businesses regarding any number of issues regarding Google, get your Google My Business, the Google Maps listing service, Google AdWords issues, AdWords Express, Google Analytics, and so on and so forth. It's G Suite. So if you have questions, go there. It's a free resource. You just go in to the link on the page, log into your Google account, and ask your question. I'm an Evernote certified consultant, the note-taking application. We've done episodes, webinars on here already about that, but if you have any questions about Evernote, feel free to shoot those over to me as well. And I'm a HootSuite Global Brand Ambassador. HootSuite is the social media dashboard tool that I typically recommend to clients, and I just think it's a great tool. So if you have any questions about that, always happy to answer those questions as well via email or Twitter. So today's agenda is going to be how to choose a good telephony system, sort of a platform for your business. And there's a lot of stuff here, so I'm probably going to caveat a lot about what I can and cannot help you with regarding your telephony, but we'll get through it. We'll talk about basically the tenets of choosing a good telephony system, and then we'll talk about some of the key products that you can use from a sales and customer service, sales and support perspective, and then we'll talk about a couple of the productivity tools that I like to use and that I have seen other people use to great effect for being able to be productive with regard to just phone calls and limiting phone calls and making the appropriate phone calls, that kind of thing, and then we'll do question and answer. Okay, so that'll be the next hour together. So let's just start off with the fact that we are in a state where people are actually using voice calling less and less, right? So for the last probably, I guess, 7 years, I've been seeing the Nielsen surveys, and J.D. Power has been putting out data regarding this, that telephone use voice telephone use has been decreasing over time. I think it's probably as low as 300 minutes a month per person now. But the reality is that I actually think that for good small business owners, we should actually be working to increase that number of phone call minute rate interaction and engagement with our customers. And the reason for that is that the more impersonal the interaction engagements, that is text message, email, social media posting, those kinds of things, a lot of people forget that there's a heart and mind on the other side of that piece of technology, right? But voice is very, very powerful. It's the reason why I advocate for podcasting. It's the reason why I advocate for in-person seminars, these kinds of webinar environments for customers to market. And in a sales and support perspective, telephone really does increase sales, and there are lots of ways in which you can, bolster stronger sales, planning and marketing campaigns based on that. So understand that you should really have a telephony component to your sales and marketing campaigns. And of course, it's just good customer support to pick up the phone when your customer calls you with an issue, right? So that's where they're going to not only be, rectified for something that might be wrong, but also the opportunity to buy from you again. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about telephony. First and foremost, what is telephony? Most people sort of ask me, and they're like, that's great, Ray. I don't know what telephony is. So let's cover what telephony is. Telephony is actually, it's the technology underpinning that led to the invention of what's now we know as the telephone, right? And it's come to encompass a little bit more than that nowadays, because so much of that is a blended technology, right? We have voice communications, we have fax, and then we have other data communications, data that we transmit over telephone lines. The most notable one would be ISDN and then DSL, which carries the broadband internet over those telephone lines, and now we have the competing fiber optic network that carries those things, and so that gets sort of pulled into telephony, even though it's not traditionally, part of the technology. It's sort of bundled underneath that. There's another sort of buzzword that has been running around, and I've actually talked about it in a past webinar as well, which is the idea of unified communications. And unified communications is just basically corporate speak for, taking everything and bundling it together in an integrated communications platform, right? So you could consider instant messaging, Slack, which is a portal for you to be able to communicate with your staff internally as a team, Skype, voice, video conferencing, group video conferencing, email, and so on and so forth. Bundle it all together, and that's basically UC. That's unified communications, okay? I am not going to be speaking so much about unified communications today as I will be about specifically telephony and with a focus on voice, because I think that's the most appropriate place for us to focus right now. We may do other topics on this, but I really want to focus on the voice technologies and a little bit of maybe text messaging component with it because of mobile, and just the fact that we have a lot of mobile access today, and then of course internet access as it relates to all of that. So we're gonna stick within the telephony area, a little bit sort of gray, but for purposes of what we'll be discussing, it'll basically be voice, text messaging, a little bit of fax, and then the collateral broadband data that connects to it. Okay? All right, so how do you choose a good telephony strategy for your business? Well, one of the first things you need to know is your own company's phone habits. So if you're not a startup and you actually do have bills hanging around that you've gotten from your various phone services, that could be mobile, that could be landline, that could be internet, that could be any number of those things. But basically, if a telecommunications provider provides you with a bill, it's probably a good idea to grab the last 6 months of all of those bills and actually review them to see whether or not you can identify habits. Where are the overages? What services have you been using? What services haven't you been using? Like call waiting is for some people you have to pay for that in your plan. Well, if you're not using it, you could save a couple bucks a month by not having that, and that's a couple bucks usually per line. So that actually aggregates. If you've got 15 or 20 phones hanging around in some offices, that actually ends up becoming real money every year that you can actually save. So knowing your company's habits are going to be really important. Something that you should also do, and I like to do this with startup entrepreneurs, is doing surveys. So not only talking to your staff, but also your vendors and clients, and identifying how much they want to actually talk to you. How much is good for you to talk to them? That is, how much voice communications is really going to be necessary from a sales and support perspective. Many people don't realize that customers will say, oh, you know what, I would actually rather communicate with you for these issues. When I have a problem with the widget that I just bought you, I would actually rather talk to you on the phone than to interact and engage in an offline or an email-based asynchronous communication platform, because it just takes longer to get that thing resolved, that problem or issue resolved. Or you've decided up front that based on your discussion with your strategy and your team, all sales will be done by phone strategy. You're going to make phone calls, you're going to call your leads and try to bring in sales that way. And so if that's the case, well, then you need to make sure that your ability to call outbound is your strongest suit so that you're able to go out there and effectuate that strategy. Okay, so know your company's phone habits. So many times people are not looking at their calling data, they're not looking at their phone bills, and they're not talking to their people, their clients, vendors, and their staff, and then looking at themselves and identifying what kind of person am I, right? So as an entrepreneur, I know that I'm an ambivert. You know, I'm not quite an introvert, I'm not quite an extrovert. I sort of dabble on both sides of that. Some of you might sort of have to pick your jaw up off the ground thinking that I was just only an extrovert, but really I am an ambivert. I have very introverted parts of me, and so I have to be very aware of the fact that I don't lean toward the phone call. You know, I'm not going to pick up the phone first. I'm usually going to send an email first, and so I don't make a lot of outbound phone calls, but I receive a lot of inbound phone calls from my clients. Well, that's something that I need to be aware of, that more often than not, the strategy for me to increase sales and to do better customer service is to pick up the phone and call my client and get them on the line rather than generating that first email, because my clients tend to like to be on the phone. Not all of them, you know, that's not everybody, and it's not possible to actually, for me and the size of my company and the amount that I travel for work, it's not possible for me to call every client, you know what I mean? But I'm aware of the fact that there's a correlation there between my customers enjoying and liking that one-to-one relationship and voice communications being a prompt for higher sales. So if you see that correlation also, why wouldn't you take advantage of it? Okay. Next up is knowing your needs. So a couple of things that fall in line when it comes to knowing your needs is, one, are you a fixed location business? That is, do you take phone calls only when you're in a retail shop? Do you take phone calls when you're outside of the store? Are you a service business that only takes phone calls while you're at the office, or do you need to be mobile at all? These are questions that are fundamentally important, especially if you're a new business, because this will help decide whether or not you get basically terrestrial or cellular-based services versus services that are only web-based and therefore fixed to your location and therefore not necessarily capable of being accessed outside of it very easily. And there are ways to do that, and we could talk about that. But the point is that, are you talking about a fixed area, you know, retail shop, or, you know, phone on the retail counter, a phone at your desk, and then otherwise those go to voicemail or are picked up by an automated assistant system, basically a system that, you know, dial 1 for this, dial 2 for that, dial 3 for this, you know, or are you planning on having that phone number, you know, reach you on your mobile phone when you're away from the office? These are all, you know, decisions you need to make about your company out the start. And if you haven't done that yet for the business, this is really the time to start thinking about that from a communications policy perspective. Because if you're thinking about this just for, okay, well, it's just me, oh, that's all I care about, you know, and so I'm just going to have my, you know, my mobile phone, and that'll be the end of it. Well, there's actually more involved there. What if you do hire someone? How are you going to manage them? And then if you grow to 10 people, how are you going to manage that consistently across the board without it being arbitrary and feeling imbalanced? Is your sales team all going to have mobile devices, you know, and is your in-house administration, are they going to all have desk phones? That's something that you have to decide on. Or is everybody going to have a mobile device? So knowing your needs are going to be really important. Things to consider. Are there going to be communal phones? Is there going to be retail counter phones? And are you going to have basically specific individual users tied to a number, what we call DIDs? Basically, you know, I have a phone line with a phone number as opposed to a phone with an extension. I call, you know, a phone number 703, you know, 555-1212, and then I dial an extension to reach you. Well, is that a soft line, an extension, or am I going to have a real phone line? So is there a real phone number that's behind that I could direct dial to? Those are all additional costs, and we want to be very cognizant of those things. And what are your mobility needs? Are you going to be away from the business And will that require you to have access to the business? Is that going to be you utilizing your personal phone, or is that going to be you getting an additional hardware piece that you then have to manage? So that's really important. Next, know your BYOD and CYOD policies. So what's BYOD and CYOD? Well, basically, it's bring your own device or choose your own device, okay? Which means BYOD, you are bringing your device to the company, your personal device, and you're using it for business, and the same thing for your staff. Or you're choosing your own device, that is, your business is going to provide you, because you're choosing it, a series of devices through your service provider, and your staff and you get to choose among those devices available, okay, that are basically that work on the plan that you're going to buy, okay? And so if you don't have a BYOD or CYOD policy, then you need to establish one, right? So really, again, this is like mitigating risk, but also just making your life easier, because eventually, if you have staff, it's going to come up, right? I'm using my phone for work. You know, I pay for my phone. I don't want to use my phone after hours, but if they're salaried, then there's a presumption that they're going to be available to get the job done. Does that mean they need to take phone calls? I don't know. Well, you need to figure that out and really decide on what those policies are. So a good communications policy is really, really helpful here. And establishing an appropriate communications policy, I think I've mentioned this before, but Nancy G. Flynn, if you look up her books on communications policies, are very good starter materials for being able to develop those. All right, so once you know those pieces, what you're already doing or what you anticipate doing from a phone habit perspective, are we gonna decide on the sales strategy and get all that stuff together? What are our current needs and our future needs? Are we going to provide devices, provide hardware or not provide hardware? And that includes, putting desk phones, on counters and so on and so forth, as well as mobile devices. Then you can start to choose the hardware and whether or not you need a landline, have internet bundled into the service and mobile service as well, okay? So does that all make sense? I hope it does, because it's really important for you to take this into an aggregate and integrated perspective, because there's no reason not to buy usually in a bundle with regard to the major networks. So AT&T and Verizon have made major inroads in developing small business plans, and the most recent J.D. Power survey, has shown this, that the very small business has inured the benefits, have gained the benefits, that is, of basically, the increased customer satisfaction from greater choice, better plans that cater to small business. So the big networks are doing that. That means the smaller regional and local networks are following suit, and you're getting more and more access and coverage. The things that you do really have to think about when it comes to this, though, are if you have a business that's local, say it's a local dry cleaning company, and the reality is that you likely only make local phone calls. You're not, unless you are shipping, something off to be, dry cleaned, you're limited in scope to probably a 5 to 50 mile radius in terms of who you're going to be dealing with and calling. So you may not need more than, local service. If you have international phone calls, or international vendors for your business, well, that's going to be a completely different situation. So you really need to take that into account when you're interacting and engaging with local and regional networks, because they may not have the coverage, right? So if you travel for work, as I do, there's no way that I can't be on a major network, because if I show up in, in California tomorrow for work, I need to be able to still interact and engage in my business. And that means I need to watch for things like data overage and what we call throttling. So this is in the mobile side of things specifically, but many mobile networks will basically, after you use a certain amount of data, they'll call it an unlimited data plan, right? Which has been going away, but now they're coming back into fad. It's just they're trying to figure out how to get the most money out of all of us. And the idea there is that if I use X, gigabytes of data, which I do use quite a lot of, mobile data, because I tether to my phone, tether internet from my phone to my computer when I'm on the road most often. If I get to a certain limit, then my data slows down. So I've of course increased that to the highest amount I can, and that way I get the solid speed I need while I'm on the road. Not everybody needs that. So if you don't need that, reduce it. It's sort of like increasing your deductible for an insurance, right? If you want to play the risk, you can go ahead and increase the deductible, therefore your insurance premium will decrease. Well, in my case, I'm choosing to increase the data speed amount that I'm paying every month so that I never have to actually pay overage and or get my data throttled. So I don't want it to be throttled. And I think generally you can make those decisions if you're tracking your phone habits and the phone habits of the staff that you're paying for their devices, okay? So for the service. So pay attention to those things, and that way you can maintain on an ongoing basis. So remember that even after you decide on what you're going to purchase and what you're going to lease and what you're going to buy, now you're going to have to look forward and decide on looking at this into the future, probably 3 to 6 months looking at the bill every month just to make the bills potentially, but hopefully you're buying a bundled service and so it's coordinated. And then that way you can say, oh, you know what, we're not using this service at all. Let's cut it. And it's usually in that first period, whether that be 30 days, 60 or 90 days, that the telecommunications provider will modify your contract without you having to increase or lengthen the contract's term, right? So if you make 6 months from now, you say, oh, well, we don't really actually need this phone line. Well, the telecommunications provider is going to probably say, okay, well, in order to make that change, you need to re-sign the contract, and now you're pushed out potentially another X number of years for that. And you want to, again, from a business perspective, it's risk mitigation to have as short a term on that contract as possible, so you want to basically make sure that you sort of think about those things. Okay, so have any questions? I'll be happy to answer that which I know regarding choosing telephony systems and mobile service plans, and I can give you my thoughts in terms of who I think is sort of doing good stuff out there. And of course there's prepaid plans and month-to-month plans as well that can actually be very effective for some business owners. Okay, so now I wanted to talk a little bit about the availability of telephony options for sales and support, and there's quite a number of them out there, and so I just wanted to touch base on some of them. I'm not going to be able to get into sort of explaining and talking about every single one of them, but I think we can touch base on the few that I've chosen, and if you have questions about other specific ones that I may know of, I'll be happy to answer those questions. So first and foremost is the sort of, it's been around a while. People know Vonage, and Vonage actually satisfies a way to compete with big business that small businesses haven't been able to do in the past, which is you get a desktop phone, you plug it into your broadband internet that you already have, whether that's at a physical office location or in your home office or home, and you're up and running. You have a phone number, and you can make phone calls depending upon your plan. They have something from basic, to premium and so on and so forth. And I just got materials yesterday while I was at a conference, and it went over some of the materials. So I have those. If you have questions, I can always forward them along to you. But the Vonage service basically allows you to make phone calls. You pay X amount of dollars a month, and then you have a phone line. You can have multiple phone lines and multiple desktop units. And now you're able to make and receive phone calls, and it's fixed because it's fixed to the hardware. The really cool part about Vonage, though, is that if you pick up that handset and you move offices, you plug it into your internet there, and it's the same phone number, same service, you're good to go. Okay? So the ability here is for you to have basically a soft version of a DID, right? Basically a specific individual number tied to me, and I'm able to now have that phone, right? The disadvantage of Vonage, of course, is that you're tied to the web, right? You can interact and engage with the dashboard interface through a web browser, but you're really always tied to being on the web. You can't walk away from your office and be out in the road and engage and interact with Vonage, right? So you're talking about fixed area service connected to broadband speeds, and these of course are all predicated on having strong broadband service. So if you have what I call browning, not I, but sort of the technology term for it is browning, basically dips in either power or internet broadband service, well, that's going to compete with the quality of the phone call. And that also means that, if you decide to move offices, or you want to do watching video while you're on a phone call, that's going to be potentially difficult if you have poor broadband. So you have to have actually strong internet access in order for that to be the case. Okay, so again, do the cost-benefit analysis of making sure you have strong broadband. Is that cost, going to actually save you money by having the Vonage available to you, and so on and so forth. So Vonage is a great option, I think, for a wide number of businesses at varying levels, and Vonage can grow with you, both with staff and opportunities with excuse me, with moving. So I think that it's nice to have. If you have fixed location retail, you can manage lots of retail locations if all of them are just basically fixed location desktop phones. Okay. Next up is Virtual PBX, and Virtual PBX is really the granddaddy of what we call the virtual phone system world. PBX stands for plain old business lines, and so PBX is it's POTS actually. POTS is the POTS, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's all technical jargon to you. But the idea here is that PBX systems are basically phone boxes, basically, servers that are sitting in a cloud environment, and you still need to have a phone line associated with you. Typically, for most entrepreneurs, that's a mobile device, or maybe you have a home phone number. But the client never sees or engages with you through those phone systems, your mobile phone or your landline at home, knowing that you're on it. Okay, so when you call into PBX, into Virtual PBX, you have a phone number, whether it's an 888 or 800 number or a local extension, and they have a wide variety of plans. So they have like a pay-as-you-go plan where you just basically pay for the minutes that you use. They have a monthly allotment of minutes and so on and so forth. But you can basically set up a virtual assistant, sort of virtual attendant, who answers the call. It's a recorded message, and it can walk you through the tree so that if you wanted to provide people with information, you can. And some of the things that Virtual PBX can do, let's see. Virtual PBX can say, oh, hey, you're interested in some sales material. Okay, and you say, oh yeah, sure, I am interested in buying this particular product. I'd like to actually see some more information about it. And the virtual attendant can say, if you're interested in more of this stuff, dial this extension. And what happens is when you dial that code, you are then given the opportunity to put in a fax number, or phone. With your phone, you can dial your email address and those kinds of things, I think, and then it will email or fax you. I think it's fax. I can verify that. But the idea is that you can go ahead and fax a PDF to a customer who's live on the phone. So something that big businesses do, they have these systems that are able to do this. Well, Virtual PBX gives you that ability to do that directly through the phone system. You can have general voicemail boxes, so department-specific voicemail boxes, and you can also have individual voicemail boxes. And then, of course, the attendant can do transferring of lines to different people. So, for example, you're playing your you're a secretary right now, you get a phone call, I receive the phone call, and I say, good morning, this is Ray, I'm, the assistant for XYZ small business, how can I help you? And the customer on the other side says, oh, hey, I'd like to speak to, Sally, small business owner. I say, great, well, now on my phone, I have a, key combination I can press, and I can forward that call to Sally business owner, to you basically, so that you are able to then take the phone call. So from the, and I could be on my mobile phone, out in the field, I could be sitting in my living room, it doesn't matter where I am, I could be at the office. The virtual nature of it gives me the ability to control the attendant system all from just touch tone dialing. So it's really fantastic to be able to do that. And so the other side is you can push voicemails to people. You can do conference calling, so you have a conference call line. And I believe all virtual PBX phone numbers receive faxes inbound for free. Okay, so I'm going to take a little step off of here to another service called HelloFax and HelloSign, and I adore those two services. So HelloSign is a document, e-document or e-signature platform, so you can upload a document to it, put in signatures and date fields and initial fields and so on and so forth, and basically send it out to an individual or several people, and you can basically electronically sign, under, at least in the United States, under the Global e-Sign Act that was signed into law by President Clinton at the time. That allows you to be able to do digital signatures, and the HelloSign is a sister product to HelloFax, which is a fax, sort of like eFax. And so partner that with virtual PBX, which can receive faxes inbound. You could just receive inbound faxes. You can use HelloFax to send outbound faxes if your business still needs it. Some businesses still do quite heavily use faxes. Some businesses don't use them at all. And but HelloSign is a great tool for being able to do e-document signature. Maybe we'll do that as a topic sometime in the future. Okay, so virtual PBX has a whole lot of services, and they also allow for what we call a VoIP, voice over IP, soft phone. So the same thing as Vonage, you can basically purchase or lease, I believe, a handset, put that on your desk, and now you've got a phone. The beauty of virtual PBX, though, is that that phone is programmable in the sense that you can still be accessed on the road or otherwise anywhere you'd like because of the nature of the auto attendant that they've built into it. So very innovative company. They've been around, I believe, the longest of all the real virtual phone system companies, and they're a strong product. So if you have any questions about virtual PBX, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions. I've been a long time advocate for them. All right, next up is eVoice. I talked about eFax just a moment ago. eVoice is the sister product to eFax. The J2 is the company that produces eFax and several other unified communications, if you want to call that, products. So they have a lot of those services of in the mix, and eVoice is one of those products. eVoice is very similar to virtual PBX now. They've pretty much brought up the parity in terms of that. I don't believe that they have physical handsets, so they don't have the physical hardware, so you're not going to be able to get hardware from them. I could be wrong there, but I don't believe they do. So if someone's out there Googling, let Tracy know and you can correct me. And so, but eVoice is and allows you to do a lot of the same things, and because of its sister product eFax, you can also fax from eFax and that kind of thing with the appropriate plans. So eVoice is great, and so I'm trying to think of the differences in eVoice that I've seen over the years. I don't think I've seen that many. It has an auto attendant, has the ability for you to transfer phone calls and that kind of thing. I think the major differentiator between virtual PBX and eVoice, I believe, is the lack of a physical handset. Anyway, next up is Skype, and Skype is owned by Microsoft, and so it's a Microsoft-owned company, and Skype actually owns a small little subsidiary company called GroupMe, and GroupMe is a chat messaging tool that's really fantastic as well. But anyway, Skype for business is fantastic, and so I use Skype in my own business, and I find it to be a phenomenal addition to making international phone calls. So I don't want to pay for a lot of international phone calls, so I use Skype with other customers who also are already on Skype. So if you have a customer, I have customers in Europe, and so it's very easy for me to just, say, oh, let's just call each other on Skype. And now from my phone or from my computer, we can just have a phone conversation, right? If I have to call them on their mobile phone, then I can purchase, I have an allotment of credits in there, and it's a couple cents per minute for me to then go ahead and call that person in an international, to an international phone number, whether that be their cell phone or landline in their business. So Skype gives you that that extension of opportunity to go ahead and make those international phone calls directly over the broadband service or data services on your mobile device, and there's no additional, ongoing charge. I don't want my mobile service provider to be charging me every month for what amounts to just a couple of phone calls that I need to make. So, if I was calling internationally every day, well, then I would probably get a service plan that satisfied that. But it's really not necessary. Skype makes that a really easy function, and I use Skype for a lot of things. I use it for dialing into conference lines so that I can have my computer headset on and not have to have my mobile phone to my face, and that kind of thing. And it just gives you better audio quality and those kinds of things. So Skype, you have it's a credit environment, so you either purchase credits or purchase plans. What I really like about Skype is that once you set up your plan, when I make a phone call outbound using Skype, you see my phone number. So it spoofs the system so that on your side you see my 202 number, right? You just see my phone number. You don't see some random phone number or Skype or whatever. So it's really great for being able to make a phone call out to a client. Now you can put your business line in there, and your customer sees your business number face forward, and you get to control that environment. And that way they're much more likely to answer the phone if they see your phone number come up as opposed to some random or private number or whatever other people in a consumer environment, when they call from Skype, sometimes it comes up as like a 0 or a +1, and it's just like, that's it. It's a US number and there's no other data. You can actually set that outbound call number with a plan. And so I think I have the US and Canada unlimited plan, and it's a whopping $3 a month or something like that when you pay once a quarter or once a year or something like that. So it's really inexpensive for you to be able to make those ongoing calls. And so typically when I'm calling a client from my office, I'm usually seated at my desk with my headset on, and I can just make phone calls through Skype. It's right on my desktop. I can use my keyboard and mouse and my headset, and the client has no idea that I'm on a different device, but they're getting clear audio quality. It's easy for me to manage the phone call. I can mute myself and do all those things from the interface. You have to deal with some of the issues of Skype, though, which is that Skype continually updates, sometimes over and over again when you don't want it to, and those kinds of things. So there are minor hiccups that come along with it, but by and large I found Skype to be a fairly powerful platform. Skype does have a unified communications platform called Skype for Business or Skype Business, which allows for online meetings and other kinds of things. Obviously Skype can be used for video conferencing, so you can do face-to-face conferencing with other Skype users like your staff and so on and so forth, and I think you can go up to 20 or so people in a video chat environment. So very, very powerful tool. I'm just talking about the voice communications here, calling to and from, and I can receive phone calls into Skype. So if someone dials if someone dials my Skype number, dials my Skype ID, right? So I have a Skype ID, a alphanumeric identification code, and so if someone dials me there, it will then actually call my mobile phone. So it'll call me on my phone, and that way I'll get the phone call. I won't miss the Skype call because I've set it up to patch those calls through to me. So it's helpful in those cases where you have a phone call that you're trying to get on a Skype call, you haven't yet made it to the office, you're trying to get there, and the call comes through because the person dialed early or on time and you're late, which sometimes happens. Now you can actually pick up and say, oh, hey, how's it going? Once you get back to the office, you can then go ahead and dial them back, but you're not going to lose that continuity of picking up the phone and answering it when someone calls you. So that's always helpful. Okay, finally, there are others out there from a sales and marketing perspective. I think that the ones I mentioned before are probably the big ones, but there are some outliers here that are pretty interesting. Grasshopper is owned by one of the big folks. Are they owned by Citrix? I don't know. They're owned by one of the big folks. They were a smaller company. They were bought out, and now they're a part of that sort of platform. But Grasshopper is a great virtual phone system, very similar to the other soft phone systems. You use your mobile device, your mobile phone, your cell phone, or a landline, and you can manage basically one number or many different extensions or many different phone numbers using their online platform, right? But it's not a phone system. It's not a set of phone lines. It's a phone system sitting on top of it, very similar to virtual PBX or eVoice. Okay, Freedom Pop is a very interesting model. So they are a free mobile plan. Okay, and I've not yet had a customer who or a client who's been interested in actually playing the guinea pig here to to do this, the lab mouse to do this. But Freedom Pop basically is supposed to be completely free, right? You get an allotment of a certain amount of minutes, and you basically can either purchase the hardware from them, mobile phones from them, or you can bring your own device, okay, if it's compatible with their network. And the service is all based on Wi-Fi calling, so I'm not actually certain. I believe this means that it's all for fixed locations, right? So you'd have your phone, but you'd only be able to make those calls when you're inside of a Wi-Fi or have Wi-Fi access. So if you're at a Starbucks or if you're at your office or at home or whatever, it would work. But the idea is you'd only be able to make those calls in those areas. I could be wrong there, but I think that's how it works. Very similar to a Vonage phone or anything like that. You have to have internet connection in order to be able to make the phone call. But because of the general availability of Wi-Fi calling, that could be very practical for people who are always narrow Wi-Fi, especially for just business dealings. It's not your personal cellular plan, it's basically your business one. So as long as you have access, you should be able to use these things. So that's out there. Then OnSIP is the last one I'll talk about in sort of the vein of soft phones, and OnSIP is basically the next iteration of voice over IP. It's sort of a more sophisticated version of it, but they've put out a freemium version that if you're looking for a way for internal call management to be dealt with, so say you have multiple offices or multiple teams that are trying to work with one another, and you just want an inexpensive way for you to manage all of that, I believe OnSIP is the best tool there. What it does is it gives you this internal team phone system where again, it's all web-based, so these are online calls, but now you're able to manage the calls internally. You can create business hours, for example, so your team knows when a team maybe in another time zone is available, and those kinds of things. Very sophisticated management dashboard for doing those kinds of things. And then of course if you scale out, then it can grow. You can pay for the services for there to be outbound dialing, external calling to customers, and so on and so forth. So if you're planning on a full-scale call center, those kinds of things, OnSIP is a pretty good tool for being able to scale out in that fashion. Okay, next up is one of the sort of unique market leaders, because what they do is they satisfy live call answering service for small business. And there are a lot of players in the market, but none do it better than CallRuby. And so CallRuby, what they do is they do have an onboarding process where they learn about your business and they identify who calls you and some scripts associated with it. You get a phone number for support, and your customers call that number, and then they either answer the question, right, what are your hours of operation? Oh, they're from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, 10 to 4, Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday, whatever, and the person goes away. The person says, oh, I'd like to leave a voicemail message for Sally, business owner. Then the virtual assistant goes ahead and patches them through to your voicemail, and you get your voicemail message. Or they say, I'd really like to talk to Sally. They patch the caller through to you, and so on and so forth. So basic question and answer type scenarios, they're able to go ahead and answer those questions because they have basically an FAQ on you and your business, so they can answer those basic level questions. And they can also do the attendant services of transferring those. So if live call answering is really important to your business, and that tends to be the case, and if you have a small car sales business or any of those kinds of personal businesses, insurance and real estate and so on and so forth, where it's really important for you to pick up the phone that first time and really quickly. Call Ruby really does that, and does it top of the industry. I mean, they're very, very well regarded in terms of their call service. So they're not inexpensive. They're probably middle of the market in terms of pricing, but it's better than having in-house, paying for salary plus benefits of someone sitting in your office doing that work. Call Ruby really is a much more affordable plan, has much more affordable plans for that kind of thing. Okay, so just so that you know, they're out there. There are others that do this, but Call Ruby's great. They're U.S. based. They're on the West Coast, and they handle. I think they have your set of hours of operation, but I think with all the plans, they give you evenings and weekends as a part of the plan. So they'll take calls after hours and on weekends for you if you want. Okay, so a couple of productivity tools, because one, I can't help myself, but two, I think these are really just great tools for everybody to sort of know exist so that you're able to use in your business. Okay, so just very quickly, and then we'll have time for questions. So the first one is called Burner, and Burner is this really interesting application, and there are lots of case uses for it, but I'll explain it to you, and then you can sort of use it however you'd like if you want to. So Burner basically gives you temporary phone numbers, and those temporary phone numbers are different than virtual phone numbers in the sense that they're actually really telephone lines. So they're registered with the master phone systems, and they're actual telephone lines. So someone can, it's not a virtual number like they have. There's a difference between a virtual number and an actual line. So these are actual lines, and say you have a particular campaign. Just as an example, you have a particular campaign, and this phone number, is only going to be active for a very specific period of time, right? Well, that number is the phone number that you publicize, and when you are done with the campaign, in your little Burner app, you just go ahead and press burn it, and boom, the number goes dead, and it's no longer a part of your system, and people can't call it anymore. So there are ways in which you can, protect your identity. So for example, I use Burner at a lot of conferences, right? Because then I'll get lots of robocalls. And so publishing my regular phone number to my customers is fine. I want them to call me. But I don't want necessarily a lot of sales representatives calling me, especially if they just seem sort of smarmy. So so I have that phone number in the back of my head, and if I go to a trade booth and they get a little bit sort of uncomfortable with me, I'll put down my Burner number, and I have a series of them in the app, and I'll just put the latest one that I have, and then if they call me and they're I'm comfortable with talking to them, fine, I will. But if they get aggressive, or if they get they're just sort of, not what I'm looking for, I just click burn it, and that's it. They're gone. I don't have to think about them anymore because they don't have any other contact information for me, and that'll be the end of it. Okay, so it's a way to manage those things, and you can text and call from that system. It's very helpful for being able to control your privacy and identity in certain environments. So it's something to think about. Okay, next up is a service called SlyDial, and I will be the first guilty party to admit it, but I use SlyDial more than I probably should. But this is what SlyDial does. SlyDial gives you the ability to dial directly into voicemail systems of other people. And I do this with my vendors most often than not, because I just want to tell them something. I want to say, okay, this is what I want to order, this is what I need, and then that's it. I don't want to have the chit chat. I don't have time for that usually. I'm calling potentially after hours to a mobile phone. So if they have it sitting on their next to them, as many people do when they go to bed, I don't want someone's phone to dial, especially if they forgot to or they don't have it set to turn off the audio. Well, slide dial allows me to bypass that, directly dial into their voicemail system and leave a voicemail message. And then when they wake up in the morning, they've got a voicemail message from me with what I need. Okay, so if I need someone to go help a client out, at X location, typically, usually it's sort of an IT situation, I'll call a vendor in the city that I need them to be in. And I'll say, hey, by the way, this is non-emergency. My client needs 2 new telephone lines installed, and they need a new Ethernet cable routed from this office to that office. I'll email you the schematics so that you're aware. They're expecting you, this time. If it's not going to work, contact them and make it work out. And boom, they've got a voicemail message that shows up. I go on with my day. Okay, so it's really helpful for that kind of stuff where you just don't, it doesn't work every time. There are some phone systems that just don't allow for that kind of internal dialing, but most systems do. So it just basically does it. You can purchase the plan so you don't have to listen to the constant advertising in slide dial, but if you only use it once in a while, you listen to the little advertisement they play, and then you're able to leave the voicemail message. But super productive if you have that particular client who's, a little talkative, or a vendor who's a little talkative, and you just want to literally give them a message and go on with your day. So slide dial. Okay, line 2 is a great application for being able to add a second phone line to a mobile phone. So if it's just you and you want to be able to just add a second phone line so that your clients have a different number than your personal phone number, right, separating that business and personal, you can go ahead and do that with line 2. So some people don't want that connection. They want to have a different phone number, and they want to be able to basically not answer that second number, that business number, evenings and weekends. Okay, fair enough. Line 2 can satisfy that. That will create that other number. It's a virtual number that's available for you to basically dial outbound from your phone, but instead of it's using your mobile phone line, but instead of the customer on the other side or the person on the other side seeing the native number on your SIM card, they're seeing the virtualized number on the outbound phone call from line 2, which basically shows your business, outbound phone call. Very, very helpful there. Google Voice is sort of the opposite of that, although it has the same functionality as line 2. But Google Voice basically becomes your one number. And many of you know I've talked about this before. I'm a huge advocate of Google Voice. I use Google Voice in my own personal life and business life, and so that's my one number. Everybody knows that phone number, but if you're a customer, I have you set up in a category that can't dial me on evenings and weekends, and you'll go to voicemail. So if my mother calls me, it will dial all of my phones, so not just my mobile phone, but it'll call my my desktop phone, my landline, it'll call my office line, and it'll call my Skype ID. So it'll call all of those numbers, and so I want to answer the call from my mother no matter, if it's an emergency, I want to be able to answer that call. So you have the choice of how to manage call routing from the Google Voice perspective. Again, this doesn't replace a mobile phone service plan, right? This is sitting on top of that, and it basically becomes a one number, and it's a barrier between your real numbers, so to speak, and that one Google Voice number. I tend to think about Google Voice as being my real phone number because it's the only one that I ever give out, and it's the only one that I have, other than, like I said, when I give out those burner numbers to like crazy people at the trade shows. So I try to go ahead and utilize the functions of Google Voice very effectively. One of the strategies for doing that, of course, is making sure that you consistently put in all of your customers' phone numbers, because that's how Google Voice identifies your clients. So I want to know all of my clients' phone numbers, so that when they dial me, they get routed effectively, to the right person, and that way, if I'm not able to answer the phone, then it will dial my assistant's phone. She'll answer and be able to help my client when I'm not able to, or they'll get routed to voicemail if both of us are not available, and then it'll transcribe the voicemail message into text and email that to me so that I can read it. So if I happen to be in an environment where I can't answer the call, but I can read the voicemail, I can then go ahead and forward that message on to the person or party inside the in the company who will be able to get back to my client and help them, or at least get the ball rolling, fix whatever it is, get it back to me, and now the next chance I have to call them, I go ahead and call my client and say, hey, by the way, I got your voicemail, we've resolved it. And that was all while I was in a meeting or in meetings or doing a seminar or whatever, right? So it's very, very helpful in a lot of those ways. That transcription tool, just being able to it's always not perfect, you know what I mean? Sometimes it doesn't really understand my name. For some reason, it always thinks it's some other person's name, so it doesn't get my name right ever. But it gets you a general idea of what the person's looking for, and of course it has the audio file attached, so you can listen to the audio and you manage it through your mobile applications on your device and so on and so forth. So very, very helpful in those capacities. I really like Google Voice. Okay, so with that, just wanted to briefly sort of recap for you some things that you want to do as you're sort of thinking about telephony, and then we'll do Q&A. So one, really know your needs, right? Analyze your needs, know your needs, do your research, have a communications policy, and then after you've sort of set up all the technology and infrastructure and whatever, you really still need to monitor and tweak it over the course of time, and that takes into account all of the various ways in which you connect with your customers, okay? So really think about this from set the right policies in place after you've done the research. Research, set in policies in place, and those are always subject to improvement over time. Then get your hardware and service plans in place, monitor and tweak as you move forward, and you'll come together with a telephony strategy and system in place that hopefully will be better for you for sales and customer service. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Tracy, with any questions that we have, and we'll close out.
Great, thank you, Ray. So we have a couple of tool questions. What are the pros and cons of using MagicJack as a comparison to the other systems?
Yeah, so MagicJack, for those of you who don't know, is basically a card that you can plug into your computer, and it gives you phone service through MagicJack, right? I'm not quite sure actually. Does it give the person who's asking the question? You probably know more about this than me. But does it give you a phone number? Does it give you a virtual phone number? Or do you have to actually do an LOA, what we call a line order authorization, to port your own phone number over to the system? If you want to answer that question, that would be great. But the idea there then.
Phone number.
Oh, so it publishes a new phone number. Yeah, so that's a virtual phone number that it's giving you. And so there are certain things you can and can't do with that, right? So you can't text message with it. So, like a line to a Google Voice, even Vonage and virtual PBX and so on and so forth, they're adding those components so you're actually capable of SMSing. MagicJack is a consumer product, so it doesn't provide those kinds of again, using the corporate speak here, but this jargon called unified communications is not giving you greater telephony than it otherwise would. However, if it satisfies your, make a phone call, receive a phone call, that's great. It's not going to give you call waiting. It's not going to give you, certain other functionalities that you might otherwise want. I'm not even sure if it gives you voicemail. You probably know this, and that'll be good for folks who are listening to know if it does voicemail. But it's basically a consumer product, so you're going to get that kind of service on that level. Plus, I'm going to guess support is limited, and for me, that's the most important thing, right? So if something goes wrong, I want to be able to pick up the phone and maybe vent a little, and I also want someone to solve my problem immediately, because every time something's not operating, phone calls are not being answered, I'm losing business. And with something like MagicJack, that is not business focused, that means support is going to be on a slower scale if it even exists. And I bet you that you're breaking the terms of service by using it for business. So if you intimated to them in the customer support environment that you are doing this for a business, they're probably going to tell you that they can't help you because you're breaking their terms of service. So just be aware of the legalities of it to some extent, but also just the practicalities of being able to get effective and speedy support. So that's probably going to be the differentiator for you.
Okay. So the caller said that it does provide voicemail, that you can just plug the card into the wall electrical outlet, and he says the customer support has always been good.
So. That's great. That's good to hear. I would go back to terms of service there and look to see whether or not they allow it to be business certified. You're anonymous to us, so we won't tell them. but just know that if they were to find out, they probably would not support the issues.
Great. And then the last question is, what about Pat Live?
Pat Live? I'm unfortunately unaware of that service. I'm sorry, but feel free to email me. I'll put my email. Feel free to email me, and I'm happy to look at it, and I can give you my thoughts after I've had a chance to play around with it. I love playing around with new tools.
We know you do. That's why we're so lucky to have you, Ray. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded, and it'll be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recording. Tomorrow, you'll be receiving a follow-up email on the webinar with an evaluation link. Please help us to continue to improve our training by taking the time to complete the evaluation. If you'd like to complete that now, I've posted it in the chat field, and you can do that for us. Our next webinar is actually March 22nd, Digital Identity and Branding Planning on the Web, Mobile, and Social Media. That's a Wednesday, not our traditional Thursday. We're holding the webinar as part of SBDC Day. SBDC Day is a national collective proclamation of the success and impact of America's small business development centers have had across the nation. On March 22nd, follow hashtag SBDC Day and join the conversation to share your story. For more information about the day, you can go to americassbdc.org. Thank you, everybody, for participating today.